The water around Counselor Yura turned red as she pressed her bleeding hand against the quantum transmitter. The beautiful crystal city of Aquados Prime was dying around her. Through the clear walls, she could see the dark shapes moving in the deep water. The Kreth had found them. Yura's people, the Villani, had never known war. They lived in peace beneath the waves of 3 ocean worlds. They made art from living coral and sang songs that could heal sick fish. They had no weapons, no armies, no way to fight back against the hungry darkness that came from the void. The Kreth ships looked like giant sea monsters made of metal and flesh. They ate everything in their path. Yura had watched them drain the life from her sister world, Aquados Minor, in just 3 days. Now they were here, on the homeworld, and there was nowhere left to run. "Please," she whispered into the transmitter as explosions shook the city. "Anyone who can hear this. We are the Villani of the Aquatos system. We need help. We cannot fight. We do not know how to fight. They are killing everyone." The transmitter hummed and sent her words racing across space faster than light. Yura did not know if anyone would hear. She did not know if anyone would care about a race of peaceful fish people dying in the dark between the stars. 3,000 light-years away, Admiral Hune sat in his command chair aboard the dreadnought Soul's Fury. He was drinking coffee and reading reports when the signal came through. The bridge grew quiet as the translation program worked on the alien language. Hyun was a tall man with gray hair and scars on his hands from the Centauri Wars. He had fought in more battles than he could count. He had seen planets burn and watched good soldiers die, but something in the alien woman's voice made him sit up straight. "Commander Nari," he called to his second-in-command. "What do we know about this Aquatos system?" Nari was younger than Hyun, but just as tough. She had grown up on Mars during the food riots and knew how to think fast under pressure. Her fingers danced over her control panel, pulling up star charts and data files. "It's far, sir, very far. 3 weeks at maximum jump speed. The system has 3 water worlds. No strategic value, no human colonies nearby." She paused and looked at him. "Sir, they say they have no military. No weapons at all." Captain Day stepped forward from his position at the tactical station. He was built like a boxer and moved like one too. "Admiral, if they have no defenses, they'll be dead before we get there." Hyun stood up and walked to the main screen. The message from Yura played again, and he could hear the fear and desperation in her voice. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders. These were hard people who had survived the worst wars humanity had ever fought. They came from Earth, a world where everything tried to kill you from the moment you were born. "Prep the fleet," Hyun said finally. "All ships. Emergency jump protocol." "Sir?" Nari asked. "We don't even know these aliens. Command might not approve." "We don't abandon people who ask for help." Hyun cut her off. "That's what makes us human." Lieutenant Kwan was in the fighter bay when the alarm sounded. He was a small man, but his reflexes were faster than a striking snake. He had shot down 47 enemy fighters in the Hell Moon campaigns and could fly anything with wings or engines. "All pilots to stations," the speaker crackled. "This is not a drill. Emergency deployment in 10 minutes. Kwan slid into his fighter's cockpit and started running the pre-flight checks. Around him, other pilots were doing the same. They did not know where they were going or who they would be fighting, but they were ready. Earth pilots were always ready. The human fleet was not large, but it was deadly. 12 ships carrying the toughest soldiers in the galaxy. The Soul's Fury was the biggest, a kilometer-long dreadnought with enough firepower to crack a moon. The heavy cruiser Busan's Hammer carried the marine assault teams. 10 smaller ships provided support and fighter cover. All of them had been built for one purpose: to fight and win against impossible odds. Human ships were ugly compared to the elegant vessels of other races, but they worked. They were tough and mean and designed by people who knew that space was trying to kill them every second of every day. On the marine deck, Sergeant Bach was checking his gear. He was a big man with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much. His armor was scarred from a dozen battles, and his rifle had saved his life more times than he could count. "Where are we going, Sarge?" asked one of his young Marines. "Doesn't matter," Bach replied, checking his ammunition clips. "Someone needs help. We're going to give it to them." The young Marine nodded. He trusted Bach completely. They all did. Bach had brought them through the siege of Titan Station and the horror of the Proxima raids. He would bring them through this too. Back on the bridge, Commander Nari was plotting the jump coordinates. The Aquitas system was at the very edge of known space, far from any human settlements. It would take everything their ships had to get there in time. Jump calculations complete, she reported. All ships ready, Admiral. Hyun looked around at his crew one more time. They were soldiers, every one of them. They had volunteered to stand between humanity and the dark, and now they were going to do the same for strangers they had never met. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Jump in 3, 2, 1, execute. Space twisted around the human ships as they entered hyperspace. Behind them, Earth's sun became a distant point of light. Ahead lay the unknown, and aliens who had never learned to fight, and enemies who thought peaceful people were easy prey. They were about to learn that humans had very different ideas about protecting the innocent. The Deathworlders were coming, and they were bringing everything they had learned about war in the hardest school in the galaxy. The rescue fleet raced through hyperspace toward Aquatos Prime, carrying hope on wings of steel and fire. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Aquatos system, and Admiral Hyun felt his heart sink. The first thing he saw was the debris field where Aquatos Minor used to orbit. Chunks of ice and rock drifted in the void, all that remained of a world that had been home to 2 billion Villani. Sensors report, he ordered, his voice steady despite what he was seeing. 2 planets completely destroyed. Sir, reported Navigation Officer Sang, his young face pale as he read the data. Aquatos Prime is still intact, but... He paused, checking his readings again. Sir, there are hundreds of enemy contacts around the remaining planet. On the main screen, the Kreth bioships came into view. They looked like nightmares made real. Massive living vessels that pulsed with dark energy. Some were shaped like giant squids with metal tentacles. Others looked like deep-sea fish with rows of glowing teeth. They moved through space like predators hunting in a vast ocean. Count them, Hyun said quietly. Weapons Specialist Bo worked at his station, his scarred hands flying over the controls. 312 enemy ships, Admiral. Sizes ranging from frigate to super dreadnought class. He looked up grimly. They outnumber us 25-1. Lieutenant Quan was already in his fighter, launched from the Soul's Fury along with his squadron. Through his canopy, he could see the enemy fleet spread out around Aquatos Prime like a dark cloud. His fighter's computer was screaming warnings about the overwhelming number of targets. Gold Squadron, this is Gold Leader, he spoke into his comm. Stay tight and watch each other's backs. These things look hungry. Copy that, Gold Leader, came the reply from his wingman. Should we be worried about the odds? Quan smiled grimly as he checked his weapons. When have the odds ever been fair? We're human. We don't do fair fights. On Aquatos Prime, the situation was desperate. Captain Day led his Marine drop team through the planet's upper atmosphere in heavily armored shuttles. Below them, the ocean world surface was dotted with floating cities, most of them dark and silent. Only a few still showed signs of life. Target the largest population center, Day ordered his pilot. Fast approach, combat landing. These people need help now. The shuttle dove through the atmosphere while Kreth fighters tried to intercept it. The human pilot twisted and rolled, dodging energy beams that turned the air around them into glowing plasma. Marine Sergeant Bach held onto his crash straps and watched his men prepare for battle. 30 seconds to landing, the pilot called out. Kreth ground forces are already in the city. Through the shuttle's porthole, Bach could see the beautiful crystal spires of the Villani city rising from the ocean. But dark shapes were crawling over the buildings like insects, and parts of the city were already going dark. The shuttle hit the water hard and transformed into a boat. Bach kicked open the doors and led his Marines onto a floating platform. The first thing he noticed was the sound, or the lack of it. Villani cities were supposed to be filled with their musical language, but now there was only silence and the distant sound of destruction. Fan out and secure the area, Bach ordered. Watch for civilians, that's when he saw them. The Villani were unlike anything he had expected. They moved through the water with graceful swimming motions, their scaled skin shimmering in the city's lights. But they were not fighting back. They were just floating there, paralyzed by fear. A group of Kreth ground troops, things that looked like armored crabs with too many legs, was advancing on a cluster of Villani civilians. Bach raised his rifle and opened fire. The plasma bolts cut through the Kreth like they were made of paper. One of the Villani, a female with silvery scales and large eyes, swam up to him. She was shaking with terror, and her translator device was sparking with damaged circuits. Why do you fight? She asked in broken human standard. We do not understand fighting. We do not understand weapons. Bach looked at her and felt something twist in his chest. These people had never known war. They had lived their entire civilization in peace, and now they were watching it die because they had no idea how to defend themselves. Stay behind me, he told her gently. We're here to help. Her name was Lyra, he learned later. She was a scientist who studied the songs of deep-sea creatures. She had never seen violence before today, and the concept of deliberate harm was as foreign to her as breathing underwater was to humans. Meanwhile, Commander Nari was analyzing the enemy fleet from the bridge of Soul's Fury. The Kreth ships moved in patterns she had never seen before, flowing like schools of fish, reacting to threats as a single organism. They're linked somehow, she told Admiral Hyun. Look at how they move together. It's not just communication. They're sharing thoughts, maybe even consciousness. Hyun studied the tactical display. The Kreth had surrounded Aquitos Prime completely, and more ships were arriving every hour. Soon there would be nowhere for the humans to run even if they wanted to. They've never fought humans before, he said slowly. They don't know what we're capable of. What are we capable of, sir? Asked Sang nervously. Hyun smiled, and it was not a kind expression. Everything they're not expecting. Nari, I want you to start working on something. These bioships think as one mind. What happens if we disrupt that connection? On the surface, Lieutenant Kwan's fighter squadron was learning about Kreth tactics the hard way. The bioships could change shape in the middle of a fight, growing new weapons or armor as needed. But they also moved predictably like they were all following the same playbook. Gold 2, break left. Kwan shouted as a Kreth fighter sprouted tentacles and tried to grab his wingman's ship. These things are weird, but they're not creative. He was right. The Kreth fought like animals, vicious and effective, but following instincts instead of strategy. Humans fought like humans, unpredictable, adaptable, and willing to try tactics that no sane creature would attempt. The battle for Aquitos Prime was just beginning, but already the Kreth were learning that they had made a terrible mistake. They had called for easy prey and instead found the galaxy's apex predators. The humans had come to protect the innocent, and they would do it the only way they knew how, with controlled violence and the kind of courage that only came from a species that had crawled up from the bottom of evolution's ladder on a world that tried to kill them every day. The Deathworlders had arrived, and they were ready to show the Kreth what real monsters looked like. The real battle began when Admiral Hyun split his fleet. Half the ships stayed in orbit to fight the Kreth biofleet, while the other half moved to defend the planet's surface. It was a risky move that spread his forces thin. But Hyun knew something the Kreth did not. Humans could fight in multiple places at once and win. Captain Day led the first boarding action against a Kreth bioship. His Marines used cutting torches to burn through the living hull, which bled green fluid that hissed when it touched their armor. Inside, the ship was like swimming through the stomach of a giant beast. Keep moving, Day ordered his team as they advanced through corridors that pulsed like blood vessels. These things are alive, so they feel pain. Use that. The Marines planted explosive charges at key points along the ship's nervous system. When they detonated, the entire vessel convulsed in agony. Kreth defenders came rushing from deeper in the ship, creatures that looked like walking nightmares with too many teeth and claws. But the Kreth had never fought humans before. They expected their prey to run or freeze in terror. Instead, the Marines advanced with disciplined fire, each shot placed with deadly precision. Human weapons were designed to kill other humans on a world where everything was dangerous. Against the Kreth, they were devastatingly effective. Bioship neutralized, Day reported as his team planted the final charges, moving to Target 2. In space, Lieutenant Kwan was discovering the Kreth's weakness. During a desperate attack run on a massive bio-dreadnought, his fighter system started acting strangely. The enemy ship's psychic field was trying to take control of his mind. But something unexpected happened instead. Human thoughts were too chaotic, too independent for the Kreth collective consciousness to handle. Instead of controlling Kwan, the bioship started having what could only be described as a mental breakdown. It began firing randomly at its own allies and spinning in circles. "Gold Squadron, this is Gold Leader," Kwan called excitedly. I think I just gave that bioship a headache. All fighters get as close as possible to the enemy. Let them try to read our minds. It worked. Human pilots were trained to think fast and make split-second decisions independently. When the Kreth tried to link with them, it created interference patterns that spread through their collective consciousness like a virus. Bioships started breaking formation and attacking each other. On the planet's surface, Sergeant Bach was teaching the Villani the brutal mathematics of warfare. He had set up a defensive perimeter around the last major city, using the Villani's own architecture as cover and firing positions. Listen carefully, he told Lyra, who had volunteered to help translate for the other civilians. War is about controlling space and movement. You make the enemy come to you where you want them, then you kill them efficiently. Lyra's large eyes were filled with horror and fascination. But they are living beings. How can you speak of killing so calmly? Bach pointed to a group of Villani children huddled behind a coral barrier. Because if I don't kill them, they'll kill those kids. Sometimes the only choice is who dies, them or us. I choose them. He showed the Villani how to use the human weapons his Marines had brought. The rifles were simple enough on point, aim, pull trigger. But the concept of deliberately harming another creature was almost impossible for the peaceful aliens to understand. Think of it like surgery, Bach suggested. Sometimes you have to cut to heal. Sometimes you have to fight to protect. A few of the younger Villani started to get it. They were still gentle beings, but they could see that their children were dying, and these strange humans were the only ones trying to save them. Commander Nari was working on something bigger. From her position aboard the heavy cruiser Busan's Hammer, she had been studying the Kreth collective consciousness, looking for a way to turn their greatest strength into a weakness. Admiral, she called to Hune over the comm, I think I have something. The bioships are all linked through quantum entanglement. If we can create a resonance cascade using the planet's magnetic field as an amplifier. English? Commander? Hyun replied as he watched another bioship explode under concentrated human fire. We can give their entire fleet the mother of all headaches, sir, but it means using Soul's Fury as bait. We'd have to get them to surround us completely. Hyun understood immediately. It was a trap that would put his flagship and crew at enormous risk. The kind of desperate gambit that could win the war or get them all killed. Do it, he ordered. All ships fall back to defensive positions around Aquatos Prime. Make it look like we're retreating. The Kreth took the bait. They saw the humans pulling back and thought they were winning. Bioships moved in from all directions, surrounding the Soul's Fury like sharks sensing blood in the water. Weapons specialist Bo watched his screens as hundreds of enemy contacts closed in. Sir, they're right on top of us. If this doesn't work, it'll work, Hyun said with more confidence than he felt. Nari's never been wrong about tactics yet. On the planet below, the final assault was beginning. Thousands of Kreth ground troops emerged from the ocean, moving toward the human defensive positions like a living tide of claws and teeth. They had been feeding on the planet for days and were hungry for more. Sergeant Bach looked through his rifle scope at the approaching enemy. Behind him, Villani civilians waited in terror. Beside him, his Marines checked their weapons one last time. In the sky above, human fighters dove through clouds of Kreth bioships. Here they come, he said quietly into his comm. All units, weapons free. Show these things what Earth teaches its children. The humans opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts lit up the ocean's surface like a light show. Explosions sent geysers of water hundreds of meters into the air. The Kreth had never faced coordinated defensive fire before. They were used to hunting helpless prey, not fighting soldiers who shot back. But there were so many of them. For every Kreth that fell, two more took its place. Slowly, inevitably, they pushed closer to the human lines. That's when Commander Nari triggered her trap. The Soul's Fury had been charging its main weapon, while surrounded by the entire Kreth fleet. But instead of firing outward, Nari fired downward, sending a massive energy pulse into Aquatos Prime's planetary core. The pulse bounced back, amplified by the planet's magnetic field, creating a quantum resonance wave that spread out in all directions. Every Kreth bioship in the system suddenly found its connection to the collective consciousness severed. For the first time in millions of years, individual Kreth found themselves alone in their own minds. They had never learned to think independently, never developed individual personalities or decision-making abilities. The effect was immediate and devastating. Bioships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly started flying randomly. Some attacked their own allies. Others simply stopped moving entirely. paralyzed by the alien concept of being alone with their own thoughts. "Now," Admiral Hyun shouted. "All ships, attack! Hit them while they're confused." The human fleet struck like a hammer. Ships that had been outnumbered 25-1 suddenly found themselves fighting enemies that couldn't coordinate their defense. It was like fighting a pack of wolves that had suddenly forgotten they were wolves. The tide of battle was turning, but the cost was high. Too many good people had already died, and the fight was far from over. The quantum resonance wave spread through the Kreth fleet like a plague of confusion. Bioships that had moved as one mind for millions of years suddenly found themselves alone and terrified. Some tried to flee. Others attacked randomly. A few simply drifted in space, their crews paralyzed by the concept of individual thought. Admiral Hyun watched the chaos from the bridge of Soul's Fury and felt a grim satisfaction. The trap had worked, but the battle was far from over. The Kreth still had superior numbers, and desperate creatures were often the most dangerous. "All ships, press the attack," he ordered. "Don't give them time to adapt." Lieutenant Kwan led his fighter squadron through the confused enemy formations, picking off bioships that were firing at their own allies. His small force had been reduced to just 3 fighters from the original 12, but they fought with the fury of cornered wolves. "Gold 2, take the cruiser on the left," Kwan called to his wingman. "I'll handle the dreadnought." It should have been suicide, a single human fighter attacking a ship the size of a city. But the bio-dreadnought was paralyzed by its sudden isolation from the collective mind. It drifted helplessly as Kwan dove toward its primary weapon clusters, his missiles finding every weak point with deadly precision. On the planet's surface, the effect was even more dramatic. Thousands of Kreth ground troops suddenly stopped their coordinated assault and began wandering aimlessly. Some attacked each other. Others just stood in the water, staring at nothing. Sergeant Bach seized the moment. "All units advance! Drive them back into the ocean!" His Marines moved forward with disciplined fire, cutting down confused Kreth troops who no longer remembered how to fight as a unit. The Villani civilians watched in amazement as their gentle protectors became efficient killers, each human moving with deadly purpose. Lyra swam beside Bach, still trying to understand what she was seeing. "Your people, you fight like you were born for it." "We were," Bach replied grimly as he reloaded his rifle. "Earth doesn't make gentle things. Everything there tries to kill you from the day you're born. We learned to kill back." The battle was turning, but victory came with a price that made Hyun's heart heavy. Captain Day's boarding team had been trapped inside a bioship when it began its death throes. The living vessel was collapsing on itself, and there was no way to get the Marines out in time. "Admiral, this is Captain Day," came the transmission, filled with static. "Tell my wife. Tell her we saved them. Tell her it was worth it." The bioship imploded, taking Day and his entire team with it. 43 of humanity's finest soldiers gone in an instant. Hyun closed his eyes and added their names to the long list of people he had failed to bring home. But their sacrifice was not in vain. The Kreth fleet was breaking apart, individual ships fleeing in random directions as their crews struggled with the alien concept of being alone. Commander Nari coordinated the pursuit, her tactical genius turning the retreat into a rout. "Most of them are running," she reported. "But Admiral, we have a problem. There's a group of bioships heading for the outer system. They're not confused. They're organized." Hyun studied the tactical display and felt his blood run cold. A dozen of the largest Kreth bioships had somehow resisted the resonance wave and were regrouping beyond the planet's orbital ring. They were the oldest, most powerful vessels in the fleet, ancient predators that had devoured countless worlds. "They're adapting," he realized, learning to think independently. The ancient bioships began to move toward Aquatus Prime with deliberate purpose. These were not confused animals running in panic. These were apex predators that had found their balance and were ready to finish what they had started. "All ships intercept course," Hyun ordered. "We can't let them reach the planet." The final battle was the hardest. The ancient Kreth had learned from watching their younger cousins die. They fought with cunning and patience, using tactics that showed millions of years of experience. Their bioweapons were more advanced, their armor tougher, their crews more disciplined. Weapons specialist Bo found his targeting system struggling to lock onto ships that could change their molecular structure at will. "Sir, conventional weapons aren't penetrating their hulls. They're adapting to our attack patterns." Navigation Officer Sang was pale as he watched 3 human ships get destroyed in rapid succession. "Admiral, we're losing this fight. Those things are too strong." That's when the unexpected happened. The Volani entered the battle. Lyra had been listening to the human communications, learning about their tactics and their courage. She swam to the city's central communication array and began to sing. It was not the gentle song her people usually made, but something new. A battle song that carried the rhythm of human weapons and the harmony of human teamwork. Other Volani heard her song and joined in. Across the planet, millions of voices rose in a chorus that had never existed before. The sound of a peaceful people learning to fight for what they loved. The song did something unexpected. The ancient bioships, which had been immune to the quantum resonance, suddenly faltered. The Volani music operated on frequencies that disrupted their nervous systems in ways the Kreth had never experienced. "They're slowing down," Lieutenant Quan reported excitedly. "Whatever those fish people are doing, it's working." Admiral Hyun seized the moment. "All ships, full attack. Everything we have." The human fleet struck with devastating coordinated fire. Ships that had seemed invulnerable moments before now found their defenses failing. The combination of human weapons and Volani song proved too much for even the ancient predators to handle. One by one, the great bioships died. The last one, a massive creature that looked like a living planet, tried to ram Sol's Fury in a final act of spite. But Sergeant Bach's ground teams had been busy. Marine demolition experts had planted charges throughout the city's tidal generators, and when they detonated, the resulting tidal wave caught the bioship and smashed it against Aquatos Prime's largest moon. The silence that followed was profound. After days of constant battle, the system was finally quiet except for the gentle singing of the Volani as they mourned their dead and celebrated their survival, Admiral. Hyun stood on his bridge and looked out at the debris field that had once been the Kreth invasion fleet. His ships were battered, his crew exhausted, and too many good people had died. But they had done what they came to do. "Casualty report," he ordered quietly. Commander Nari's voice was heavy with exhaustion. 40% casualties across all ships. We lost Captain Day's entire boarding team, half of Kwan's fighter squadron, and 30% of Bach's Marines. The price of victory. It was always too high, but it was the price that had to be paid when evil came calling and good people chose to stand in its way. The Volani would rebuild. They would learn to defend themselves, and they would remember the humans who had crossed the galaxy to answer their call for help, bringing hope on wings of steel and fire. 3 months after the battle, Aquatos Prime was healing. The Volani had learned to rebuild their cities with defenses in mind, and the crystal spires now included weapon platforms designed by human engineers. It was strange to see such beautiful architecture mixed with instruments of war. But the galaxy had taught the Volani a hard lesson about the price of peace. Lyra swam through the memorial garden they had built for the human dead. Each name was carved in living coral that would grow and change over the centuries, ensuring that the sacrifice would never be forgotten. She paused at Captain Day's memorial and touched the surface gently. "I am learning your language better," she said in careful human standard. "I want to understand what you died for." Admiral Hyun stood beside her, older now and carrying more scars. He had stayed to help with the rebuilding, but soon he would have to return to human space. There were other battles to fight, other calls for help to answer. He died for the idea that good people don't stand by and watch evil happen, Hyun said quietly. "It's a very human concept. Maybe too human." "No," Lyra replied firmly. "It is becoming a Volani concept too. We are learning." She was right. The peaceful fish people were changing, adapting to a galaxy that was more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They were still gentle and artistic, but now they also understood the need for strength. Some of their young people had even volunteered to train with Sergeant Bach's Marines. The story of Aquatos Prime had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Galactic Council, a loose organization of spacefaring races, had called emergency sessions to discuss what it meant. For the first time, a species had answered a distress call from complete strangers and fought to save them, without asking for payment or territory in return. Commander Nari was in the council chambers on Centris Station, giving her testimony about the Kreth threat. The assembled delegates listened in shocked silence as she described bioships that could think as one mind and devour entire ecosystems. "The Kreth are still out there," she warned the council. "What we fought at Aquatos was just one swarm. Intelligence suggests there are dozens more spreading through the outer rim." The Altarian delegate, a tall, blue-skinned humanoid, raised a tentative hand. Commander Nari, why did humanity respond to the Villani distress call? You had no alliance, no trade agreements, no strategic interest in that system. Nari looked at him with the kind of expression humans wore when asked why water was wet. Because they asked for help, she said simply. That's what you do when someone asks for help. The concept seemed to confuse many of the delegates. Most galactic civilizations operated on principles of mutual benefit and calculated risk. The idea of rushing across space to help strangers was as alien to them as the Kreth collective consciousness. But some understood. The Tyranny Federation immediately signed a mutual defense treaty with humanity. The Free Worlds Alliance requested human military advisors. Even the normally isolationist Christek Empire opened diplomatic channels for the first time in 3 centuries. Lieutenant Quan was at the new Human Naval Academy on Mars, teaching alien pilots how to fly like humans. His students included Villani, Altarians, and even a few of the insectoid Hivekin, who had overcome their natural fear of individuality. Flying is about making decisions faster than your enemy, he told his mixed species class. You can't wait for permission or consensus. You see a threat, you eliminate it. You see a friend in trouble, you help them. Everything else is just details. A young Villani pilot raised a webbed hand. Instructor Quan, what if we make the wrong decision? Quan smiled, remembering all the times he had made split-second choices in combat. Then you learn from it and make a better decision next time. The only real mistake is not deciding at all. Sergeant Bach had a different assignment. He was on Villani Prime, the species' new military training world. Teaching peaceful beings the hardest lesson in the galaxy. Sometimes you have to fight to protect what you love. I know this is difficult for your people, he told a class of Villani recruits. Humans have been fighting for millions of years. You've been peaceful for just as long, but the galaxy doesn't care about your intentions. It only cares about your capabilities. The recruits practiced with training weapons, their movements still graceful and flowing despite the violent purpose. Bach watched them and felt a strange pride. They were learning to be warriors while staying true to their gentle nature. It was a balance that even humans struggled with sometimes. Back on Earth, the news networks were calling it the greatest military victory in human history. But Admiral Hyun knew better. Victory was measured in lives saved, not enemies killed. The real victory was that the Villani still existed, that their children could grow up to sing their ancient songs while knowing they were protected. He was in his office aboard the new Soul's Fury, the 3rd ship to bear that name, when the next distress call came in. This time it was from the thermal colonies, a group of mining worlds under attack by something called the Void Cult. Admiral, Commander Nari reported from the bridge. We're receiving an emergency transmission from the Kepler system. They're requesting immediate assistance. Hyun stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, people were dying. Somewhere out there, families were being torn apart by forces they couldn't fight. And somewhere out there, humans were getting ready to do what they did best. Stand between the innocent and the dark. Signal the fleet, he ordered. Emergency deployment. All ships. Sir, we don't have authorization from command yet, Nari reminded him. We don't abandon people who ask for help, Hyun replied, using the same words he had spoken months ago above Aquatos Prime. That's what makes us human. The phrase had become something of a motto among human forces. It was printed on recruitment posters, carved into ship bulkheads and whispered by soldiers before battle. 4 simple words that explained why humanity had become the galaxy's protectors. That's what makes us human. As the human fleet prepared for another desperate journey across space, messages poured in from across the galaxy. The Villani republics pledged their support. The Tyranny Federation offered supplies. Dozens of other species that had never spoken to humans before sent words of encouragement. The galaxy was learning that when the innocent called for help, the humans would answer. It didn't matter how far they had to travel or how impossible the odds. Earth's children had been shaped by the hardest world in known space, and they had learned that sometimes the most dangerous species in the galaxy was also the most necessary. The Soul's Fury and her escort ships entered hyperspace, carrying hope and human fury toward the Kepler system. Behind them, Aquatos Prime continued to heal, its people singing new songs that mixed ancient melodies with the rhythm of human courage. The legend was spreading. When evil came to call, the Deathworlders would answer. When the peaceful needed protection, humanity would provide it. And when someone somewhere in the vast darkness between stars sent out a call for help, they would hear the same reply that had saved the Villani. Help is coming. The humans are coming. In a galaxy full of predators and prey, humanity had chosen to be something else entirely, the guardians of those who could not guard themselves. It was a role they had never asked for but would never abandon. The Deathworlders had found their purpose among the stars.